So I'm originally from the border of Texas and Mexico, on the Texas side. That's where most of my family is from. So we've always actually considered ourselves Texican or Mexican American. And that's because my dad was born in Mexico, my mom was born in Texas, but she is of Mexican heritage. The thing that's kind of unique to my family, at least from my side, I would say, is that we don't identify as much with the Spanish side. In fact, we tend to associate some of the Spanish side, the European background, more as associating with colonialism and exploitation. And so growing up, this is not a view that I necessarily hold now, but that was the view that my mother held. She thought of us as Spanish Jews, actually, which is kind of interesting. So she thought of us as Spanish Jews fleeing persecution from the Europeans that would eventually come and colonize the Americas. And those Spanish Jews came together with the native Mexicans and the Native Americans, and that was the majority of our bloodline. I don't think she was right. She didn't work for Ancestry.com or anything. Sorry, Mom, RIP. But it did kind of inspire me to have a slightly different take.
Mexican American as well. My parents are both from Texas, and I am as well. My grandparents immigrated here from Mexico. Texican, that was interesting. I've never actually used that word.
Yeah, my mom was really weird.
But it makes sense though to say Texican. I guess we identify more with the Texan part. Like that's a big source of pride for us. Yep. Central Texans or Tejanos was the other word.
Tejanos, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
My fluency in Spanish is trash.
And you, Leo?
My fluency in Spanish is leftovers that were left out on the kitchen table for about 3 weeks, but they still smell okay, so they're edible. But they're gonna cause some damage later on down in the night. You know what I'm saying?
This man is a liar.
No. So my fluency, I would say I'm somewhat proficient. I'm fluent, but if I had to rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being like Sundere-chan fluent, I would probably, I don't consider myself a native speaker, actually. So I would say maybe a 6 out of 10. When I have Google Dictionary or Google Translate in front of me, boy, I go up to a 9.5 out of 10, you know what I'm saying? But that kind of defeats the purpose of being fluent when I kind of have to rely on that. But it's good enough to get me through most conversations, to be able to deal with advanced legal terminology if need be, even though I may be a little slow sometimes. I can read, write, and speak Spanish, but I feel like I can actually write Spanish better than I can speak it. So like my thoughts, when I can have a moment to sit down and try to put it on paper, can come out a little bit more fluent, a little bit more clear than when I'm in the moment and I just have a random exchange with someone like at a gas station, especially depending on what their culture and their dialect is. Like everyone is different. You might be able to speak very fluent Spanish with other people that are fluent Mexican Spanish speakers, but then you go to Puerto Rico for 5 minutes and then you end up looking like you just graduated. You failed kindergarten, baby. You need to go back to school because you can't, you're just like, oh, ¿qué dijo tú? You can't keep, it's a different dialect. It's different.
I think I didn't learn Spanish as a kid because I'll be quite frank with you, I think I was part of the problem, that I found it embarrassing and I didn't want to try because I also think there was maybe the environment in which I was learning wasn't so supportive. It was like you make a mistake and then immediately harshly criticized. So it's part environment, but it's also partly my fault for not being open enough and vulnerable to try it. And I guess I got a lot of pressure from my family to learn Spanish, which made me all the more closeted. So it was just kind of this cycle of discouragement. But it's unfortunately continued, and now I'm in my 30s and I still have not learned it.
So my relationship with Spanish was very similar to Queen's relationship with Spanish, in that when I was growing up, I actually faced some degree of discrimination. I'm not going to say it was like that severe or that harsh, but I think it added up over time. And it affected me because I felt like I was bullied a lot by Mexicans. So I was bullied a lot by my own people for not being Mexican enough, for the color of my skin, for being different than them. And so one of the names I was called was like gringo, like, oh, you're a white boy, right? You can't speak Spanish. And every time I made a mistake too, it'd be like, mira este gringo. And I would feel so humiliated by that. I didn't understand at the time that when I think about it, it was just one of the things that kids would do, right? That kids will find anything to pick you, to set you apart. And so my family also engaged in that, and that can also be part of the culture, right? I've noticed that with some of my tias, right? My aunts, you go home and it's like, oh, damn, you've gained weight. Oh, estás bien flaco, estás bien gordo, like you're always something different. And they may not mean it, but it feels like it's part of their cultural expressions to put you down. And when I was growing up, I was extremely sensitive. So it took me a very long time to start to work up the courage and I would say more of like the tolerance to that sort of judgment, and to say, I don't give a shit what you think. I have to learn Spanish to survive. I need to learn it, and then part of my career has required it. The time when I started my law firm and when I was running my business on my own, a lot of the clients are Spanish speaking and they need Spanish speaking legal representation. And I don't have the luxury of being able to pick and choose. And so if I have a little bit of Spanish, I had no choice but to take that and try to expand as much as I could. So that's what I did. It's not necessarily that I wanted to. There was a lot of moments where I felt embarrassed. I felt like, oh, I'm like, you feel the sense of panic. Like, oh, I don't know these words. I don't know what I'm saying. They're gonna figure me out. They're gonna know that I'm not, like you feel like you're an imposter. But I've, over time, just come to try to accept it. And so I feel like I come from a similar position to Queen, but because of necessity and maybe because of some differences in the support that I got, I was able to move beyond some of that block. And I do genuinely believe, I don't believe she ever has to learn Spanish to be a fucking badass and a valuable member. In fact, I know many people that are very good at Spanish, extremely eloquent, and they're absolute garbage. Like, being able to speak a language don't mean a goddamn thing. It depends, what are you saying? What are you contributing to the world, right? That's what matters to me.
The ability, or rather inability, I suppose, to speak Spanish has definitely made me feel like an outsider. To this day, I don't feel Mexican enough, Latina enough. It's a weird identity crisis that I have going on pretty much every day.
Apart from the language, but what other things make you feel like you're not Mexican or Latina?
The language is a huge one. I'm not going to lie to you. That's probably the number one thing. The majority of the reasons I feel, discouraged and like I'm not Mexican enough, I'm not Latina enough, is definitely the language. The cooking also a little bit, because I am no cook. My cooking is nuclear waste. So I don't cook, and much less I don't cook, Hispanic foods or Mexican foods or whatever. So I feel pretty far removed, from it in those respects. Oh, and I guess music too. Just the things I listen to on a day-to-day basis. I don't listen, and I don't think you do either, to like Tejano music, mariachi music, merengue, salsa, bachata. I don't listen to any of that.
I used to.
You used to, but I don't.
Yeah, I have had a period. That's an interesting topic. So the question about feeling like, how Mexican do you feel? Right? How connected do you feel with the culture? It's one where I feel similar to Queen in that a lot of my life I have felt disconnected from it. And I think part of that comes from the way that my mother was also not really like a traditional Mexican. Like I had friends where it's like, mira, ¿qué estás haciendo? Ven para acá. Ven para acá, pinche cabrón. No, estés haciendo eso. Like they have this sort of talking where it's just, it's like, there's certain levels of Spanish which you can tell come from different regions of Mexico. So you can hear it in the sound. And my mother had like a very poetic way of speaking. She was a storyteller, and she hardly danced. She read a shit ton of books, and she was highly educated, even though she didn't have all the degrees and whatnot. Extremely creative, and she loved to focus on our Indian roots. So she was like, these are the true Mexicans, right? This is what your real history is. It was never like, no, vamos a ir a hacer la pinche. Like, my dad was more of that side. He grew up dancing cumbia. He grew up dancing with some Tejano music, making cabritos in the back. And like my mom, she was associated with a lot of that food culture, but she was also like, she was a bit of a unicorn. Because she would find like French cookbooks and be like, motherfucker, I'm gonna cook this shit. And the next thing you know, she's like, mijo, look what I cooked. She was also, like I said, kind of a weirdo. So like, there's times where she would do impressions and she would actually try to play them off. Remember how we learned that story? So she'd be like,
I forgot about that.
Leonardo, ven pa' acá, bonito, ven a ver, dude. But she would like try to do an Italian accent, but she was serious. She was really trying
And
to be
seriously
Italian.
bad.
And she was really bad at it, yeah, at the accent too. But like, I feel like I had more of the mix. And so it wasn't until later that I wanted to reconnect with that, where I felt like I was missing some of the culture. And then I didn't start to learn how to do Latin dance until I was in high school. And I learned it from my buddy Steven, who is, he's
If
this,
you're watching, hi Steven.
hi Steven, we love you.
Miss
dude.
you.
He's a baby. But he's a wonderful dude from South Carolina. And we called him Bernie Mac because he looked just like the comedian Bernie Mac. You know, Bernie Mac, be talking like this. No, he looks like Bernie Mac, but talks like what's his name? Like Jamie Foxx mixed with not Tom Brady. Who the fuck's Tom Brady? He talks like Jamie Foxx mixed with Wayne Brady. So he's like, hi there. Good to speak to you. My name's Steven. Vamos a hacer el baile. Yeah, like very Jim Carrey, like, but he was really good at Latin dance, and he was like, vamos a bailar. And we ended up starting a Latin dance club together. I had never danced before in my fucking life because I didn't grow up with that. And I was like, you know what? Now's my time. And I decided to fucking embarrass the shit out of myself and try it. Oh, I'm talking way too much. I'm sorry.
No,
long story. But anyways, the point is, I felt such a gap between where I grew up and like the Hispanic culture as I saw it developing, that I felt like I had to take huge steps to catch up. I had to sprint ahead because I was so far behind, and I felt like I've been trying to do that ever since. But you know, it's one of those things where it was kind of like a hamster, right? I was running on a hamster wheel the whole time. It was all in my head. Like, Hispanic culture, Mexican culture, to me, it does have an objective factor, but it's also what the fuck I say it is. It's what the fuck I say I decide I want it to be. I pick and choose shit that I like. I could say, oh yeah, I know people in Mexico do that. I'm not from Mexico. Fuck that. I'm from the border, baby, and that's its own culture. I'm a border boy, but I'm also not from the border, bitch. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, which is like a goddamn baby Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? It's like New York's fucking, you know what I'm saying? It's another fruit in the city, pies, you know what I'm saying? It ain't the big apple, it ain't the big peach. It's like a tangerine or something. Oh, excuse me, the children. Anyways, Bottom line is, I don't know. A lot of that stuff. I mean, we can have conversations about it all day, but I think the rejections that I had earlier in my earlier life if I look at it now, it was painful, but it's allowed me to kind of try to shape my own identity. But that's hard, right? It's not, I could always be like, oh no, pues, chale, güey, vamos a hacer la pinche comida. And it's like, okay, you know why? Because that's how all my friends talk. But that's not all my friends. My friends are from everywhere in the fucking world, and that's what I love. I don't have to be tied down to Mexican culture. Mexican culture is worldwide, baby. Texican culture is the world. So, well, what? I don't even remember the question. My bad.
Oh man, okay, that's a loaded question. What is Latin culture to me? That's so funny because I had the exact opposite viewpoint that you do.
Oh no.
Because you said you pick and choose what you want and you make it you, and that's, you know, Latin culture. To me, it's like a fancy restaurant I can't get into. It's exclusive, it's over there, it's unreachable, it's unattainable because it's so different, it's so foreign, and I can never fit that mold. I can never go through that door because I'm too different. So yeah, Latin culture to me, like if I had to describe it in a few words, I would probably say something extremely stereotypical. Like it's Mexican food, it's Spanish language, it's salsa dancing, it's blah, blah, blah. But I'm not at that point yet in my life where I can say, yeah, I pick and choose things and that's me and that's what it means to me. No, it feels very, very, you know, again, no pun intended, foreign to me, something unattainable. It's like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill. Like it's just unattainable goal. I have had advantages to not being identified as Mexican, and one of them, I will be completely real with you, and this is kind of bad to say, but I get a lot of compliments about you look very exotic, and it's like, well, where are you from? Are you from Syria, Pakistan, Egypt? I've gotten all of these, and it's like, nope, I'm from Texas, you know. So
that's exotic.
You know, I can't lie, you know, and say it kind of feels good to be complimented on your face, I'm just saying. But I think otherwise there's just a lack of stereotyping that goes on with me. And I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes I feel like the associations with being Mexican are not good. And I hate to say that. That
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like there's a sense of you're dirty, you're lesser than, you're poor.
Yep.
And people don't assume that about me. You're less educated, and I'm very well educated. You know, I really hate to say that. This is raw, man. This is extremely raw, and I am giving you the cold hard truth of what it's like to
That's
be
right.
me.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's cold, this one.
That was cold
Yeah,
as fuck.
cold as ice cream I'm gonna put
Yeah,
in my
even
throat.
it out though.
Yeah, right here. We're even it out.
Even it out.
When I think about the
Advantages.
advantages of the times I've not been classified as Mexican, right? I've been classified as something other. For the most part, there are advantages. Some of them exist simply because I don't always look like Mexicans. And in the beginning, it was used against me, right? Because, you know, I would join the soccer team, and I was generally taller and lighter than everybody else. And everyone would be like, no, pásame el balón, banda, no, pásame. And everybody's like running laps around me, right? And they really did. That's not a stereotype. It's facts. I wasn't as gifted. I wasn't as natural with that sort of thing. So earlier, I wouldn't fit with some of the traditional thoughts of what a Mexican looks like and acts like and sounds like. But over time, I also noticed that it would help get me access
Yeah.
to other cultures, to other backgrounds, and other classes too. Like there were times where I've had to learn how to do code switching, right? You learn how to
Yes, code switching.
speak a certain dialect, right? So you learn how to you learn how to speak in a certain way, and you're able to connect with other cultures. So from a young age, I learned how to code switch, right? To speak in a different way, to adjust based on the type of culture that I was in, based on the type of company that I had.
And I learned the same thing.
Yeah.
Not to encroach on your answer,
No,
but
please do,
I also
please do.
learned to do the same thing.
Part of it was because we had to. We had to. If we noticed that, like, when I tried to adapt some elements of Mexican culture, like I would grow. There were some friend groups I had that are like, no mames way, and if I talked like that around some of my white friends, they would. I noticed that the exclusion was a little higher. I felt more of a disconnect, and they even had more like straight up racist jokes. They'd be like when things would come up, they'd be like, no mames, like, dude, like, well, fucking go cut my grass or something, bro. Like, what the fuck? And I would be like, oh, damn it, they're right. They got me. They fucking roasted me, shit. And I know that kids will be kids, right? They're gonna do stuff like that. But when I started dressing a little more like them, like there was a time where I tried to dress like some of the cholos. So I had like Nike Cortez, and I had like size 3XL shirts. I had a New York Yankees jersey or something, and I didn't even fucking like baseball or anything like that. And then I had like long ass cargo shorts. I don't remember. They're Dickies shorts. So it's like work clothes, and it's that with the high socks. And I literally tried to wear this stuff, and I couldn't fit in with some of my white friends, and I felt a lot more discrimination. And it wasn't until like, okay, I'm gonna be a little, you know what? I started adapting a little more preppy of a style, and well, I felt like I could fit in more with some of the white crowd. And as I did that, well, a lot of the white people tended to be more of the folks that had, you know, they had resources. They came from wealthy families. They had, like, I would go to their house sometimes, and I'd be like, holy shit, look at all these they have so many video games. What happens?
That's not what I thought you were gonna say.
What?
The stories about, oh my God, they have the best cereal.
They would have the best cereal. Well,
Resources, access to resources.
They would have like
cereal.
19 boxes of like extra large BJ's Warehouse Wholesale Club Frosted Flakes, and I was like, oh my God, all I have at home are like bootleg cocoa, no, not even that, but bootleg Raisin Bran. It was Raisin Bran. Anyways, I gotta go back. I forgot where I was. Got distracted.
Code switching.
The advantages of being non-Mexican,
I think,
have been, you know.
I wanted to interject real quick and say something that I was taught.
Go ahead.
About, similar to code switching, somebody very close to me taught me at a young age, you want to be the right type of minority.
Yep.
And I feel like that
and
says a
what do you think
lot.
the right type of minority is?
That means, God, it's horrible. It means somebody that's a minority that acts white, right? That is educated, they're rich / well-off, access to resources, eloquent, all this sort of stuff.
Right.
Cleans up nice. But why does that have to be, act white?
Yeah, it's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So you can change the way you dress. But what I discovered later on was that there are preppy Mexicans. That there are people in Mexico that look like they're like Victoria's Secret models in Germany. Like they're like blonde hair, blue eyes, and all these European features. And then you start to realize that it's a much bigger systemic problem than what you thought it was. And then you realize that even being Mexican, that Mexico has like its classes of racism. And then you have people like in the small indigenous populations that are being like persecuted and kicked out by the urban dwelling police. And it's in a lot of countries. You have colorism, classism, and it's a messy, complicated thing. So we just try to deal with it based on our history, overall, I think that my relationship with being a Mexican American has been filled with difficulties and challenges, but so has the whole entire history of the country of Mexico and most of Central and South America. So I don't think that makes me that much special, that much more different than many of the people there. And overall, I'm very happy that I've been able to connect and try to overcome some of the obstacles I had in my youth. And I hope to continue to connect with Latin cultures, and not just being Mexican, but all the other diverse and beautiful cultures that the world has to offer.
I'll end on a positive note here that even though my relationship to Latinidad is not where I want it to be, it's getting better. I'm becoming more vulnerable and able to explore these things, and as I go on, I do think it'll get better to where I don't feel so ostracized from my own people, and I'm excited for where this is going to take me, because it's not over yet. Life is a journey, it's not a destination. There's a lot more life to be lived, and we'll see where it takes me.